The winter wind clawed its way across the old cemetery, rattling the brittle branches above. Gray clouds hung heavy in the sky, threatening rain, near the farthest row, where the grass grew patchy and the stones leaned like tired shoulders. A small boy knelt beside a fresh mound of earth. His jacket was frayed at the cuffs, his shoes scuffed and damp. He pressed both hands flat against the cold soil, as if trying to push through it. "She's still here," he whispered. "She's still alive. I can feel her." No one answered him, only the wind sighed back. From across the path, a tall man carrying a bouquet stopped mid-step. His name was Daniel Hartman, a self-made millionaire who rarely visited this place, except once a year on the anniversary of his father's passing. But today, it wasn't his father's grave that caught his attention. It was the boy. Something about the way the child spoke to the ground, soft, certain, and unafraid, sent a chill crawling up Daniel's spine. He walked closer, the crunch of gravel under his shoes breaking the silence. "Hey," Daniel said gently, "are you all right?" The boy looked up. His eyes were swollen from crying, but there was no trembling in his voice when he asked, "Do you know how to tell if someone's breathing?" Under the ground, Daniel froze. "Breathing, my mom," the boy said, patting the dirt as if to comfort it. "They say she's dead, but I don't believe them." Daniel glanced at the headstone. Maria Bennett, beloved mother, gone too soon. The date of death was just 12 days ago. "You don't believe them?" Daniel asked, crouching to meet the boy's gaze. The boy shook his head. "They didn't let me see her. They said she died in an accident, but I heard them whispering, saying something about keeping it quiet." "Who's they?" Daniel asked. "The people she worked for, Mr. Clive and Mrs. Parson." His lips trembled, but his eyes, those sharp, searching eyes, never looked away. "They didn't like my mom because she found out something. I think they hid her." Daniel felt an odd tightening in his chest. This wasn't just a grieving child's imagination. There was certainty in his voice, and a quiet desperation that made Daniel's pulse quicken. "Kid, what's your name?" "Eli. Eli Bennett." Daniel nodded slowly. "All right, Eli. Tell me everything." Eli looked at him, as if measuring whether this stranger could be trusted. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "In my dreams, she's calling me. She's trapped somewhere, and she keeps saying, 'Don't let them bury me.'" A gust of wind swept between them, carrying the faint smell of wet earth. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he thought he'd buried long ago, a sense of responsibility for someone else's fight. And that's when the thought hit him, clear and cold. What if the boy was right? Daniel stood, eyes locked on the fresh grave. If there was even a chance, even the smallest chance, he wasn't going to let this rest. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. He had returned home to his high-rise apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and the glittering city lights spread out beneath him, but his mind wasn't on the view. It was on a boy with worn shoes and a voice that didn't waver when he said, "She's still alive." Every time Daniel closed his eyes, he saw Ellie's small hands pressed against the dirt, like a child trying to keep the earth from swallowing someone whole. The boy's eyes weren't those of a dreamer lost in grief. They were the eyes of someone who knew. By midnight, Daniel had pulled his laptop toward him, typing the name Maria Bennett into search bars, scanning news articles, obituaries, and public records. The results were sparse. A short obituary, no photograph. A brief mention of a car accident outside of town. No details, no witnesses listed. He leaned back in his chair. Something didn't feel right. In his experience, when things didn't feel right, it usually meant someone was hiding the truth. The next morning, Daniel drove to the small neighborhood where Maria Bennett had lived. The houses here were close together, paint peeling from porches, fences leaning under years of wind and rain. People watched from their doorways as his sleek black car rolled down the street. He parked in front of a modest one-story home with faded blue shutters. Ellie's house. It was silent except for the rustle of leaves. Eli answered the door before Daniel could knock. Twice. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair a little unkempt, but his face lit up with something between hope and fear. "You came," Eli said quietly, almost like he didn't expect it. Daniel nodded. "You said you wanted to tell me more. Can I come?" And Eli stepped aside. The inside smelled faintly of dust and old paper. On the mantel was a framed photograph of a woman with warm eyes and a smile that felt alive, even in stillness. Daniel guessed it was Maria. She worked at an elder care center, Eli began, sitting on the couch, knees pulled to his chest. She liked helping people. But a few weeks before, he stopped, his lips pressing tight, before they said, "She died. She told me she found something wrong. Something about the medicines they were giving the old people." Daniel leaned forward. "Wrong how?" "She said they were giving medicine they didn't need, to keep them weak. She was going to tell the families." Daniel's mind sharpened like glass. If what Eli was saying was true, then Maria hadn't just been an employee, she had been a threat to someone's scheme. "Do you know anyone who might have wanted to stop her?" Daniel asked. Ellie's eyes flickered. "Mr. Clive. He owns the place, and Mrs. Parson. She's the head nurse. They both came to the house after it happened. They didn't cry. They just made me sign some papers. I didn't even know what they were." Daniel's stomach turned. Papers for a child to sign. That wasn't just unusual, it was suspicious. He pulled a small notepad from his coat. "Eli, do you remember where they buried your mom? The exact spot?" Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper. "I remember, but you can't tell them you're going there. They'll stop you." Daniel closed the notepad. "I'm not telling them anything." That night, Daniel parked on the edge of the cemetery. The air was cold enough to bite through his coat. He stood by the grave, the stone cold under his fingers. The silence felt heavier here, like it was holding something back. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a car door slammed, then nothing. Daniel crouched down, pressing his palm to the ground the way Eli had. Nothing, just the solid chill of winter earth. But as he stood, he caught a small detail barely noticeable unless you were looking. The soil near the headstone wasn't level. It looked disturbed. Fresh. And for Daniel, that was enough. This wasn't going to be just a visit to a grave anymore. This was going to be a search for the truth, no matter how deep he had to dig literally. And in his gut, he knew, if Eli was right, the truth waiting under this earth would change everything. Daniel woke before sunrise, the city still shrouded in a faint blue haze. He didn't usually wake this early unless he had a business flight or an important meeting. But this morning was different. The thought of Maria Bennett's grave pulled him from sleep like an unfinished sentence. Over black coffee, he studied the notes from his conversation with Eli. Every detail replayed in his mind, the names, the papers, the uneven soil. The more he looked at them, the less this felt like a grieving boy's fantasy, and the more it felt like the first threads of something far darker. By mid-morning, Daniel was driving toward the elder care center where Maria had worked. The building sat behind tall iron gates, its brick facade neat and respectable, the kind of place meant to give an impression of trust. But Daniel had been in business long enough to know that appearances were often the most carefully constructed lies. Inside, the reception area smelled faintly of antiseptic and artificial flowers. A woman at the front desk looked up from her computer, her smile practiced. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you? I'm looking into some donations I made here a few years ago." Daniel lied smoothly. "I wanted to speak with Mr. Clive." Her smile faltered just enough to notice. "Mr. Clive isn't available at the moment. Is there something I can pass along?" Daniel leaned on the counter, his voice lowering. "It's about Maria Bennett." The woman's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Her eyes flickered just for a moment before she regained her composure. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't have any information about her. If you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." She began to turn away, but Daniel caught the faintest tremor in her hands. It told him more than any words could. Back outside, Daniel's phone buzzed. It was Eli. "They came to my house this morning." Ellie's voice trembled but was steady, enough to carry the weight of fear. "Mrs. Parson. She asked if I'd been talking to anyone about my mom. She said it would be better for me to forget." Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I said no," Eli whispered, "but she didn't believe me. She kept looking around, like she was checking if anyone else was listening. Then she left." Daniel glanced around the parking lot of the elder care center. A black SUV sat 2 rows away, windows tinted to dark to see inside. It hadn't been there when he arrived. Something told him he was being watched. That night, Daniel didn't go home. He drove to a storage facility on the edge of town, unlocking a unit he hadn't used in years. Inside was a stack of old equipment tools from his early construction days. Among them, he found what he was looking for: a heavy-duty shovel, a work lamp, and a tarp. His hands lingered on the shovel's handle. If he did this, there would be no turning back. But the image of Ellie's small figure in the cold cemetery pushed every hesitation aside. Hours later, under the cover of darkness, Daniel returned to Maria Bennett's grave. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the air smelled of damp earth. He set the lamp low, its beam barely cutting through the mist dot with one last glance. Around the empty cemetery, he drove the shovel into the ground. The sound was dull, the soil heavy from winter rain. Each lift of dirt seemed louder than it should have been, the silence swallowing the sound almost instantly. He worked quickly but carefully, his breath forming clouds in the air. The deeper he went, the stronger his unease grew, not from the act itself, but from a growing certainty that he was going to find something that would upend everything. Then, after what felt like hours, the shovel hit something solid. Not wood, not stone, something else. Daniel froze, his hands gripping the handle tight. The lamp's light caught on the faint outline of a dark, smooth surface, and just then, a sound cut through the night, soft, almost impossible to hear over his own heartbeat. A muffled thump, coming from below. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. He stood motionless, shovel still in the dirt, straining to hear again. For a moment, there was nothing but the low hum of the lamp and the distant groan of wind through the cemetery. Gates. He almost convinced himself he'd imagined it until it came again. A faint, muffled thump, followed by something else, a scrape. Daniel's hands tightened on the shovel handle. He glanced over his shoulder into the darkness, half expecting to see someone standing there. The cemetery was empty, but the hair on the back of his neck stood straight, as if the shadows were holding their breath. "Maria," he whispered. Before he could stop himself, the noise came again, slightly louder this time, and Daniel's chest tightened. It wasn't the random shifting of soil. It was deliberate, controlled. He dropped to his knees and began scooping the dirt with his hands, ignoring the sting of cold earth biting into his skin. Soon, his fingers struck the smooth surface again, this time more clearly. It wasn't a coffin, at least not like any he'd seen before. The surface was metal, thin and dented. Every instinct told him this was wrong. Burials didn't happen in thin metal boxes. This was something else entirely. Daniel brushed more dirt away until he found a small latch. His breath fogged in the cold air as he tugged it, but it didn't give, rusted. He reached for the crowbar he'd brought just in case and wedged it into the seam. The metal groaned. That's when he heard it, a muffled, panicked rhythm from inside, a fist hitting from within. His chest constricted. "I'm here. Hold on." He shouted into the soil, though he didn't know if the sound could reach whoever was inside. With one last heave, the latch snapped, and Daniel pried the lid open. The smell of stale, trapped air rushed out, and there, in the dim beam of the lamp, were 2 eyes staring back at him, wide, frightened, and very much alive. It was Maria Bennett. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. Her voice was hoarse, no more than a whisper. "Please, help me." Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. She was breathing, but too weak to climb out on her own. He reached down, wrapping his arms around her, and pulled her free from the metal box. She clung to him, trembling so violently he could feel her bones. "How long?" he began, but she shook her head quickly, eyes darting to the darkness beyond the grave. "They'll come back," she rasped. "If they find me gone, they'll come back." Daniel's mind raced. Whoever they were, they had buried her alive and made it look like an accident, and now they had no idea she was free. But if she was right, time was short. He grabbed the tarp and wrapped it around her to shield her from the cold. "You're safe now," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was true yet. Her breathing slowed just enough for her to whisper, "They buried me because I knew what they were doing to those people." The crunch of tires on gravel snapped both their heads toward the far edge of the cemetery. Headlights pierced the mist, sweeping slowly across the stones. Daniel's gut turned to ice. Someone was here. He tightened his grip on Maria's arm. "We have to move. Now." And with the sound of the car drawing closer, Daniel pulled her into the shadows, every muscle braced for whoever was about to step out of that vehicle. Daniel kept low, his arm wrapped firmly round Maria as they moved between the gravestones. The headlights swept across the cemetery again, illuminating the fog in ghostly beams before disappearing behind a row of tall oaks. Maria's breath was ragged against his shoulder. She was shivering not just from the cold but from something deeper, fear that had lived in her bones for days, maybe longer. "Can you walk?" Daniel whispered. "I'll try," she said, her voice trembling. They crouched behind a large marble monument as a black SUV rolled slowly down the cemetery path. The engine idled, and the sound of doors opening echoed in the stillness. Two figures stepped out, both wearing dark coats, one tall, broad-shouldered, the other slimmer, moving with quick, sharp motions. Even at a distance, Maria stiffened at the sight of them. "It's them," she breathed. "Mr. Clive and Mrs. Parson." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He'd suspected these were the people Eli had mentioned, but seeing them here confirmed everything. This wasn't paranoia. These were the people who had buried Maria alive, and now they were back to make sure she stayed that way. "We have to keep moving," Daniel said. Quietly, they slipped between the headstones, using the fog and the uneven rows as cover. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. Too fast, and they might trip. Too slow, and they'd be caught. A voice rang out across the cemetery. "Check the grave." The sound froze them both. The crunch of boots on gravel grew louder as one of the figures approached the fresh mound. Daniel had dug. "We don't have time," Maria whispered urgently. Daniel scanned the cemetery. At the far end, beyond a low fence, the land sloped down toward a line of trees. If they could reach it, they might be able to disappear into the woods. "Come on," he urged, pulling her gently but firmly. They moved quickly now, keeping low until they reached the fence. Daniel helped Maria climb over, her strength faltering. Halfway, he lifted her down as quietly as possible, though the faint squeak of the metal posts seemed loud enough to give them away from behind. A shout broke through the fog. "They're gone." Daniel didn't look back. He pulled Maria into the tree line, the darkness swallowing them. The forest floor was soft with leaves, muffling their steps, but every crack of a branch underfoot felt like it echoed for miles. After several minutes of weaving through the trees, they reached a dirt road. An old farmhouse sat a few hundred yards away, a single light glowing in the window. "Think we can trust them?" Maria asked, her voice barely audible. "We don't have a choice," Daniel replied. They hurried toward the house, and Daniel knocked sharply. After a long pause, the door creaked open to reveal an elderly man with sharp, wary eyes. "Help us," Daniel said, his voice steady but urgent. "She's in danger. We need somewhere to hide." The old man studied them for a long moment before stepping aside. "Get in, quickly." Inside, the air was warm, smelling faintly of wood smoke and tea. Maria sank into a chair, her face pale, her eyes darting to the window. "They'll look everywhere," she murmured. "They won't stop until—" She broke off, her voice catching. Daniel crouched in front of her. "Then we'll be ready. But first, I need you to tell me exactly what you found, and why it was enough for them to try and bury you alive." Maria's gaze locked on his, a mix of fear and determination. "You won't believe it. No one would. But if we can get it to the right people, it will destroy them." Outside, in the distance, the low hum of an engine echoed through the night again. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we start tonight." The old man moved quietly round the kitchen, setting a kettle on the stove while Daniel kept watch at the window. The dirt road outside lay still under the moonlight, but somewhere in the distance, that low hum of an engine still carried on the wind. "They'll come this way," the old man said without looking up. His voice had the certainty of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize danger by sound alone. "If you're going to do something, do it before they find this place." Daniel glanced at Maria, who sat hunched in the chair. clutching the edge of a wool blanket the old man had given her. She was breathing easier now, but the shadows in her eyes hadn't faded. "You said you found something," Daniel reminded her. "Something about the elder care center." She nodded slowly. "They were ordering medications that the residents didn't need, expensive ones. They gave them to people who were healthy just enough to make them weak, confused, dependent. Then they billed families for extra care, claiming it was necessary. It was stealing lives one slow dose at a time." Daniel's stomach knotted. "And you confronted them?" "I collected proof," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to keep going. "Copies of orders, patient reports, payment records. I planned to give them to a state inspector. But before I could, Mr. Clive found out. The night I went home, they were waiting." Her hands shook as she spoke, her fingers twisting in the blanket. "They didn't want police or doctors involved. They put something in my tea. I woke up in that box, underground, hearing the dirt hit the lid." The room went silent except for the hiss of the kettle. Daniel's grip on the windowsill tightened until his knuckles whitened. "You still have the proof?" he asked. Maria nodded. "I hid it in Ellie's toy box. They never looked there. But if they find him before we get to it—" "They won't," Daniel cut in, his tone leaving no space for doubt. He turned to the old man. "Do you have a phone?" The old man shook his head. "They cut the lines out here years ago. You'll need to drive into town." Maria leaned forward. "If you go, they'll follow you. They're watching." Daniel thought for a moment, the pieces of the night clicking into place. "Then we make them follow me away from here while you get to Eli." "No," Maria said instantly. "You don't know what they'll do." Daniel met her gaze. "I've dealt with people like them before. They rely on fear. That doesn't work on me." From outside came the sound of tires rolling slow on gravel. Headlights swept across the edge of the trees, inching closer. Daniel straightened. "It's time." The old man handed him a weathered set of truck keys. "It's not fast, but it'll get you out of here." Daniel took them, then knelt beside Maria. "The moment I leave, you take the back path through the woods. It'll lead you straight to the highway. Flag down help, get to Eli, and get that evidence." Maria gripped his hand, her voice soft but fierce. "Don't let them catch you." Daniel managed a faint smile. "That's not in the plan." He stepped out into the night, the cold biting deep. The black SUV was closer now, crawling toward the farmhouse like a predator. Daniel climbed into the old truck, its engine coughing to life. As he pulled onto the road, the SUV's headlights swung toward him, accelerating. The chase had begun, but Daniel wasn't just running. He was leading them straight away from Maria, straight away from Eli, and straight toward the kind of trouble they never saw coming. And somewhere behind him, in a quiet farmhouse kitchen, Maria Bennett was about to set in motion the evidence that could bring everything crashing down. Because this wasn't just about saving her life anymore. It was about ending theirs.